and whole passages were crossed out that may or may not have related to Jesus, which wouldn't have been very positive. So I don't think we would have gotten a lot of good material from that. Because the Talmud by that time accepted the Christian presentation and so on. The Talmud was written from the 1st to the 6th century AD. But one, I think, authentic tradition about Jesus may have snuck through. I make a lot of it in my book, both books. It's called, it's attributed to one Jacob of Tlarsicania, and or Jacob of Signin, which of course is James' name. And it says, and he met this famous rabbinic teacher called Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, who was excommunicated for being sympathetic to what was called minim, or sectarians, or people that the Christian type, early Christian peoples in Palestine were thought of being. And Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, so it's a tradition ascribed to Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. I also make a lot of him in my recent book. Speaking about Eliezer's bad breath and Lazarus' stinking body. I think Lazarus and Eliezer swing back and forth as far as names go. In any case, Eliezer meets Jacob and said, "Can you tell me something about Jesus the Nazarene?" So Jacob is supposed to know something about Jesus the Nazarene. And he says, "Yeah, I can tell you something about a prostitute's hire. Jesus and a prostitute's hire. What did Jesus think should be done with a prostitute's hire given to the temple?" And I think this relates somewhat to this passage here. Have some of the same themes. Could be considered the price of blood or whatever, you know, menstrual situations, whatever. And he said, yes, he said, "You should use it to build an outhouse for the high priests." I think that's a pretty funny little episode showing Jesus to have a good sense of humor. In other words, what should you do with a prostitute's hire given to the temple? You should use it to build an outhouse for the high priest. I think that's a very, he said, "Do you think that's an authentic saying of Jesus?" Well, as authentic as any of these, I would imagine. And then this is what one has to evaluate on what looks like it may have been said by someone. Anyway, it shows the individual in question to have a very acute sense of humor and to be anti-establishment, which I accept in both those things. All right, we got to hurry. So this is Judas's hire being given to the temple. You see, it's very similar, but played off of in a different way. Luke 23:2. The appearance before Pilate. "We found this man perverting our nation and forbidding them to pay tribute to Caesar, and calling himself Christ a king." Okay, calling himself a king, that could be, not calling himself Son of God, Christ. And it could be have here Messiah, Son of God. Now, perverting our nation, here Jesus is portrayed as teaching against the temple tax. Now, there are passages in the scripture, we haven't had a chance to deal with them all, where Jesus says, okay, what shall we pay tax? And he says, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and God's what is God's. He who has ears, let him hear." Those are popular passage in the Synoptics, I think. And another case, a temple tax, they say, or something to that effect. He says, "Show me the coin," and then, or whose picture, that was that much. Whose picture is on the coin, and render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and so on. Another one has to do with go to the Sea of Galilee, and you'll find a fish there that'll come out of the sea and it'll have the coin in its mouth. You can use that coin or something like that. I forget exactly that whole passage, but there are two passages like that. Both of them show a Jesus that is rather worried about the issue. This shows a Jesus on the zealot side. We know that's what the zealots were upset about. Further, I've told you about the whole Sakari thing here. and the fact of similar enemies. Now, Christian, I know it's a long shot, but it's something to consider, because these things go through lots of different languages. You see, there's a lot of Scrabble type situations here going on, you see. And if you get it as Sicariot, you can get even more of that going on. You know, it's there's a possible play going on here. Sicari being a nasty way of speaking about Christian or something like that. You see, Judas the Iscariot, Judas the Sicari, Judas the Christian. I know it's just something to think about. There's a lot of problems with the Sicari in North Africa. Josephus tells about them in the Vita in Egypt. And they have to put down uprisings after the fall of the temple in these other places the Romans do. And they destroy a second Jewish temple in Egypt because the Sicari went down there and took refuge in it. So the Sicari were certainly a problem for 10, 20, 30 years afterward, probably even up to the Bar Kokhba period, because of the Sicaricon that I mentioned before, which was applied very stringently after the Bar Kokhba uprising. And it was directed against people who had been involved in these wars. I also told you that Sicarius can mean, in Roman legal jargon, someone who mutilated himself or circumcised others. There's a lot of give here going on in this issue. James's party, the party of the circumcision, demanding, I'm not saying circumcision is a marvelous thing or anything, only that it's the sign of the attachment to the covenant. I think these are covenantal groups. And how are you going to show your attachment to a covenant? You just can't be a Pentecostal to show it, or something like that. You have to have some overt sign of it that you are, Jehovah's Witness of some kind. You have to do something in this period, maybe not today. So circumcision loomed very large back then, as it did among the Nazis in our time, looking for anyone who showed any sign of that to kill them all. So the Sicari is an odd thing, because these groups, as I've told you before, would not have called themselves Sicari. You don't call yourself cutthroat. That's a term others apply to you. You have an internal name. What was your internal name? Well, Essie.